You've probably had this happen. A patient comes in, shows you their phone, and asks, "Have you heard about this?" Today, this is methylene blue.
Well, welcome back to Natural Medicine's Evidence in Practice. I'm Jeff Langford, a pharmacist and managing editor at NatMed.
And I'm Andrea Stafford, a pharmacist and assistant editor.
And I'm Kelly Daniels, content production manager.
And on the show, we're going to cut through trends in marketing to bring practical, evidence-based guidance for real patient conversations.
And today, we're walking through methylene blue, what it is, why patients are hearing about it, and how to approach it in practice.
Quick note, CE credit is available for our podcast through our monthly NatMed newsletter. Check the show notes for how to claim it.
So Kelly, help us set the stage here. What's driving interest in methylene blue right now?
Honestly, this one has a lot going for it from a trend perspective. First, it's the visual hook. It's bright blue. You've probably seen it online. People are posting videos of themselves taking it and their mouths are turning bright blue. So it's super memorable and people are curious. And then there's also the fact that it sounds scientific. You hear about claims about mitochondrial support, antioxidant effects, and brain performance.
And I have to admit that bright blue color is appealing. It definitely piqued my interest. And this combination of that visual novelty and scientific sounding language is what makes this feel interesting and credible at the same time. So it ends up sitting in this space we've talked about before with CMOS, where something sounds exciting and promising, but maybe the evidence isn't quite there yet.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why we want to have a conversation about this one today. But Andrea, help us think through the backstory. What is methylene blue?
Well, and it's been around for a while. Methylene blue is a synthetic blue dye with a long history. It was first used as a textile dye in 1876, and by the 1890s, it was explored as an anti-malarial treatment, and it's been used to stain microorganisms to help diagnose certain infections. But today, it's an FDA-approved prescription medication primarily used intravenously to treat methemoglobinemia, a condition where hemoglobin loses its ability to effectively bind and transport oxygen. So, might be asking, well, what's changed? And that's this context. It's moved outside the clinical setting and into conversations about improved cognitive function. It's antioxidant activity and optimizing mitochondrial function, which these are very different claims from its approved indications and those original uses.
Yeah, cool background, Andrea. It's kind of interesting for the medical nerd in me to hear that evolution from like synthetic dye to medical use to FDA drug to supplement.
Yes.
And that shift in context that you talk about is really where things can get a little bit murky, because as a supplement, methylene blue lives in a regulatory gray space. It is an FDA approved drug, or it's available in that form, but the products sold in this wellness space aren't FDA approved. And they can vary in quality greatly. So there are different formulations and purity. Some of what you see out there is an industrial grade, not pharmaceutical grade product. Methylene blue is also, as kind of a side trivia note, an antifungal or antiparasitic agent that's used in aquariums. That form should not be ingested by humans. So there's a lot that could crowd the shelves or crowd a search results page when you look for methylene blue products.
And Jeff, I think this is where this regulatory gap and these concerning formulations make this clinically tricky to navigate. Because in practice, we associate methylene blue with a controlled, monitored setting, IV administration, a specific diagnosis, and a clear indication. Not really a patient self-administering drops that they ordered online. And by the time it comes up in conversation, it's already kind of been reframed, and it doesn't sound like a prescription drug at all, but rather this natural supplement to optimize health.
Yeah, and I'm going to key in on one word you said there, Andrea, and that's natural. I think it's really important to point out this isn't natural. Goes back to your history. It's synthetic. This was synthesized in the 1800s using kind of these coal tar derivatives. So it is a synthetic product, but it does sit in this wellness space. So that's important for us to be aware of, and certainly just to help square away perceptions for folks as well.
Yeah, and that's a good clarification, Jeff.
Yeah, that's so interesting because a lot of health influencers online are touting this as a natural alternative product, but it's actually a synthetic product, which is a little bit scary. And there are also, as you say, Jeff, a lot of sources, different quality issues that come up, possible risks. What about evidence of benefit, Andrea?
And that's a fair question, Kelly. The honest answer is the evidence doesn't really support these claims. Although, mechanistically, it sounds promising. Methylene blue is thought to donate electrons to the mitochondrial electron transport chain, which, in theory, could support cellular energy production in the brain. And the early data is interesting. Animal models have shown cognitive enhancing effects, and there is a small human study that suggested neurological benefit during these attention and short-term memory tasks, though notably no effect on cerebral blood flow was observed, and these findings were based on this functional MRI imaging. So the mechanism, while plausible, that alone doesn't mean there's a clinical benefit.
Yeah, and we kind of turn the page from some of those lab-type studies that you were talking about, Andrea, and look at research in humans, becomes limited and really inconsistent, even for some of those most studied areas of interest like Alzheimer's disease. In that case, for example, there's one trial in patients with moderate Alzheimer's disease, and they did find some moderate cognitive improvement at a specific dose, like 138 milligrams per day. But that same trial found no benefit when we used a lower dose or a higher dose. Some other studies still in that same, looking at the same general disease state, looked at a slightly modified form of methylene blue and found one of them found no reduction in disease progression. The other one found a modest benefit. But these trials really had some methodological limitations, like one of them had no placebo group. And then when we try to kind of back that focus out a little bit and look at it more broadly in the cognitive space, like for general enhancement of cognitive function, memory, or age-related cognitive decline, there's really not reliable clinical evidence for those more general use cases. So it's really difficult for us to translate some of the specific and limited data in Alzheimer's disease out to a broader use for cognitive enhancement in healthy folks.
And this is a pattern, Jeff, that shows up with other conditions as well, whether that's depression or fatigue. That answer is kind of the same. That mechanism is plausible, but the data is lacking or limited, or in these very specific populations and conditions, meaning no strong clinical evidence to support kind of routine use in a healthy population.
For a patient, that's a really different message than what they're seeing online. This boosts brain's function sounds super simple, but what the research says is much more nuanced, as you said. So there's some signal in people with Alzheimer's, but even that evidence is mixed. And really, none of this actually applies to the everyday healthy person who's just trying to get a little bit of a cognitive boost.
Yeah, Kelly. So I think that population distinction is super important. There is the difference between it working for a disease state to try to reverse or mitigate a process that has happened versus preventing a disease state from ever occurring. And we really don't have data supporting that more general use. And that's before we turn the page and think about the safety profile, which is where the conversation can get a little bit complicated, Andrea.
Yes, because that safety profile does shape how we approach a recommendation here. And we want to start with the patient. There are specific conditions where methylene blue should be avoided altogether.
Yeah, so G6PD deficiency is one of those examples. In patients with this specific condition, there is the concern that methylene blue can't be converted to its active form and then accumulates, leading to blood cell breakdown and ultimately hemolytic anemia. So while data on oral methylene blue is still uncertain, we would suggest avoiding it definitely for patients with that condition.
And it's similar for kidney and liver disease as well. They're kind of on this list since methylene blue is renally excreted and hepatically metabolized. Impaired function in either organ can delay clearance and raise the risk of adverse effects. So again, avoidance is recommended until more information is available.
And we have some drug interactions that can be a concern for patients. So tell me a little bit about what you have dug into there, Andrea.
Yes. So mechanistically, methylene blue acts as this anticholinergic and serotonergic agent. So interactions with drugs or supplements in either of those classes are going to be a concern.
Yeah, and these are frequent flyers in
Yes.
routine medical use. So, for example, patients on serotonergic meds like SSRI or SNRI antidepressants, that would be like sertraline, paroxetine, fluoxetine are common examples, or supplements with serotonergic properties like St. John's wort. They are at increased risk for serotonergic adverse effects. That could include serotonin syndrome. And notably, with IV use of methylene blue, fatalities have been reported when it's been combined with serotonergic meds. So it is a serious concern. This has not been documented with oral use, but it definitely remains something that we want to keep very top of mind when we think about this supplement.
And Jeff, that does sound really alarming, but I think this is where NatMed's interaction framework is really helpful. Can you give some additional insight into that kind of interaction and that rating?
Yeah, sure. So we build interaction ratings based on the likelihood of the interaction occurring as well as the potential severity of it. And we blend all of that data to give kind of a red, yellow, green message out to users about how to manage that. So in this case, the severity rating is high because it could be potentially very, very serious. The occurrence with oral methylene blue we rank as possible because it is theoretical in this case with the oral product. And blending that together, we ultimately assign a moderate rating, meaning be careful with this combination. But I definitely think this is a case that we would skew to a very high level of caution based on that theoretical risk.
So it sounds like you've got thin evidence on one side and real safety questions on the other. So methylene blue isn't exactly a yes or no answer. It has to be a conversation.
Yeah, and these conversational answers that we need to have, Kelly, this is a space we land in a lot of times with these supplements where it's not really clear cut, and I absolutely agree with that. If these questions are coming up in your practice and you need information to drive these conversations, NatMed Pro is designed to support them.
And you can check evidence, safety, and interactions quickly, all in one place, like Jeff just demonstrated with interactions.
So you're not relying on memory, you're confirming in real time.
Plus, NatMed offers CE options and our monthly newsletter. And listeners can save 10% with code NatMed1026 at checkout. Links are in the show notes.
Okay, let's walk through a quick patient scenario to bring this together. Imagine a 30-year-old female patient comes in. She's been seeing methylene blue all over social media, and she really wants to give it a try. How does that conversation start?
Well, right away, I want to understand the patient's goals. I saw it online tells me not so much. I need to know what she's hoping to get out of using methylene blue.
Okay, so she tells you it's for focus and brain fog.
Okay, that kind of gives us a good idea of the direction we would need to go for counseling regarding the evidence around maybe focus and brain fog. But before diving into evidence, I want to make sure that this is safe for our patient. I want to know what medication she's currently taking.
Well, this patient says she's taking sertraline as well as prenatal vitamins, but she does mention that she's in the process of stopping the antidepressant.
Okay, so that's a lot to address before we even dive into the evidence. But we do hear in the scenario you're painting out, Kelly. First, we're getting definitely clued into that potential drug interaction with an SSRI or sertraline and that risk of serotonin syndrome. As we said earlier, serious concern. We definitely have to discuss that.
And the prenatal vitamins also raise kind of an immediate question. Is this patient hoping to conceive? If so, we need to be upfront that there's really no reliable safety data on oral methylene blue supplementation in pregnancy. And animal studies have shown fetal toxicity at higher doses.
Okay, so for this case, let's say she's not trying to conceive and she's committed to discontinuing the sertraline. Once those concerns are addressed, what else does she need to know?
Well, I think, Kelly, here's where we probably do go back to that evidence that Andrea helped unpack for us. And I'd say here we want to share with the patient that there isn't good evidence to support the use case that she's considering. Even if we think about for Alzheimer's disease, the evidence is mixed. And for this kind of healthy adult looking to sharpen focus or clear some brain fog, there's really no reliable clinical trials supporting that use.
Okay, so the bottom line is this trend is really way ahead of the evidence. And right now, there are risks that outweigh any possible benefit.
I agree, Kelly. I think that's where I would land too. But if the patient still wants to try it, because sometimes that happens in real world, I would counsel on those safety considerations, like ensuring an appropriate washout from her antidepressant, and then also choosing a methylene blue product from a reliable source that uses pharmacy-grade product.
Well, I think that patient scenario highlighted some of the key takeaways from this one. With methylene blue, the evidence may sound compelling, but it's still limited or lacking really for general use.
And The bigger issue for many patients isn't whether it works, it's whether it fits safely within what they're already taking, as we just saw in that patient case.
And from the patient side, this is a great example of how something that looks scientific can still carry risks that they don't expect.
So this is one where checking those interactions, slowing down that conversation, really makes an impact.
Yeah, methylene blue is a good reminder that not every trending product fits into the usual supplement conversation.
And sometimes that question isn't just, does it work?
It's, does it even belong in this patient's plan?
To claim CE, follow the instructions linked in our show notes. We've included links to the monograph, the newsletter article, and other tools we discuss so you can bring these tips straight to practice.
Also in the August newsletter, we cover some other interesting and timely topics, including a review of commonly used lactation supplements and a discussion on biotin beauty claims.
So follow and subscribe to this show in your podcast app so new episodes land automatically.
Thanks for listening to Natural Medicine's Evidence in Practice. It's evidence, not hype.
And we'll see you next month.